So once someone has realized the way in which his or her own attachment style has contributed negatively to the way the relationship played out, what can one do with the feelings of remorse and the desire to make amends, especially if your partner is just done with it? So there's a foundational thing here that has to be addressed. And the idea is that that you did something wrong. Okay. There's a balance, there's a scale that's being weighed here. And it is that there's good and there's bad. Okay. There's right and there's wrong. And what I would emphasize is that that's a form of sort of crystallized critical thinking. And I would have you consider the idea that there's no such thing as a waste of time. And what if there are no bad experiences, but if there are experiences that create contrast that allow you to see and understand something in a different way? And so if you could accept that premise, then there would be no need for remorse because it went the only way it could have possibly gone. You know, someone else may have certain feelings about that, and that's their process, and that you came together and you mixed up the soup and the soup came out tasting a certain way, and that gave you information about what goes into the next recipe, what you switch up about the ingredients you put into the next place, right? But to say that I did this wrong and I did that wrong, and to now, I think it's part of the natural process. We have a tendency to want to beat ourselves up. We gain some insight. We look at the way that we were behaving and we start to understand, oh, if I had just done this that way, then it might have had a different response. And it may be that that aha moment was in fact the fruits of that whole process that you went through. And then, you know, if the process of making amends, you know, if it's more that you want to have a conversation with someone to talk about how you may have been and to find out how their experience might have been, because you feel in that conversation there may be a way for you to come to new insights about it, then that's okay. And, you know, that's great. And that's your process. You know, I don't think there's a hard and fast rule about that. Someone asked a question similar to that where they were asking about if, like, for example, something went, what happened that was very painful in a breakup. And sometimes, you know, there's some interventions where people will say, well, you should write a letter to that person, but it may not be a letter that you ever send. It may just be that you need to write the letter, okay? Sometimes I do this with people, and maybe it's a scenario where it would be unsafe to actually establish contact with a previous partner physically, and emotionally unsafe to do that. But maybe there are things that they still want to take ownership of in the relationship. So sometimes you can write a letter to that person and then write a letter from that person back to yourself. Okay. So that's like a basic intervention that you might try and experiment and play with it. I think sometimes there may be instances where you want and or need to have a conversation with that person specifically. And that may shine new insights on how it went. But I would challenge you to kind of release the idea that you did something wrong, or that it was, you know, that you need to berate or beat yourself up over your role in it, because I really believe that it's not about right and wrong. That's where you were in your process, and to be allowing and forgiving and accepting of where you were in your process, because now that experience led you to here. And here is a place in which you have a lot of insight. And it might feel painful because you feel like, oh, the insight is showing me all the things I did wrong. But what the insight is trying to show you is, it's no, we're not trying to show you what you did wrong. We're just showing you deeper levels at which you can start to love and accept yourself. And that moving into becoming increasingly aware of the essence of what it is that you really want in partnership. And that this partnership, probably a catalytic one if this is your experience of it, this partnership is now opening up space within you to start taking ownership of things, not in a way so that you have to beat yourself up because you didn't do it right the first time, but because, or even the first 10 times, but because now you have this level of consciousness that's going to allow you to open up and create even more space for not only being more aware of the way you show up to another relationship, but also being aware of how much you got to love that part of you that maybe was too demanding, that was maybe acting maybe more avoidant, or that was playing games or whatever. It's like, oh, so that's really just a younger part of me that's been asking for me to recognize those things and to feed and to love those things first. And this partner came into my sphere so that I could, I'm going to use the word play, even though it might have been a painful play, but that I could bounce around with this, and that this could be alive and out in the world, and led me to this place where I can become now aware of my egoic attachments well enough to understand where I may not have been showing up fully. And it's okay that I didn't, because that's where I was in my process. In the same way that you wouldn't expect a child that's just learning how to crawl to dance tango with a professional tango dancer. That doesn't make any sense. And that child's not bad. That child shouldn't feel remorseful or need to, beat themselves up for just knowing how to crawl and not being able to tango. So, it's a part of accepting where you are in your process. And I would say it doesn't mean you can't have a conversation with an ex about how the relationship went down. But I would say that before coming to that, just be aware of where you're vibing at. Are you vibing from a place where you are looking for them to forgive your behavior because you can't forgive yourself for it? In which case it's a perpetuation of the same mechanism. Or are you vibing at a place where I've forgiven myself for this, and I understand that it's where I was in my process, and I understand that this is actually going to afford me a degree of empathy towards other people in my life and towards other situations in my life, and even towards future partners that I may not have had prior to that experience. And so coming at it from a place of wholeness and from really a self-acceptance and filling up your fullest circumference, then being like, okay, I think I would be curious to have this conversation with this person to explore what their perception of the relationship might have been, so that you're coming at it from a place of centeredness and groundedness within yourself, and that it's not about seeking validation or forgiveness or something from the other because you haven't quite forgiven it within yourself first. Okay, because otherwise that becomes the same mechanism. I hope that makes sense.